Welcome to Daedalus Debugger, a podcast series conceived by lucianoambrosini and co-created with me, Ive. Today we will discuss Inhabiting Intelligence, Challenges and Opportunities of Ambient Intelligence in Designing Domestic Space. Enjoy your listening.
Welcome to another deep dive, listeners. We're going to be talking about intelligent architecture, which sounds super futuristic, right?
It is pretty futuristic in some ways, but also a lot of these ideas are already happening.
Well, that's what we're going to get into.
Exactly.
Our main source for this deep dive is Architecture and Adaptation, a book by Socrates Yanudes.
Oh, yeah, it's a good one. A really thought-provoking exploration of...
I know. It made me think about buildings in a whole new way.
Right. Like, what if buildings were more than just static structures?
Yeah. What if they could learn and adapt?
And respond to our needs. It's a fascinating field.
Okay, so let's start with something from the book that really blew my mind. Back in the 1970s, an architect named Cedric Price designed this concept for a retreat center.
The generator, right.
Yes, the generator. And it was all about these movable cubes or modules that could be rearranged.
Not just by the people living there.
Right, but also by a central computer.
That would learn from how people were using the space.
And then suggest new layouts. It's like the building could say, hey, why don't you try this arrangement?
I love that idea. A building that's like, let's shake things up a bit.
I know. It's almost like the building could get bored.
Yeah.
Which makes me wonder, what does intelligent even mean when we're talking about architecture?
That's a great question.
Could a building really have a mind of its own? Like actually think?
Well, it's important to understand how AI researchers approach the concept of intelligence.
Okay, so how do they think about it?
Well, it's not exactly about replicating human thought processes.
Mm-hmm.
So the generator, while a really cool concept, might make us think of a building with a human-like brain.
Right.
But AI is a bit more nuanced than that.
I see. So how do they define intelligence then?
There are actually different types of AI.
Oh, really?
Two main types that are really relevant to architecture are symbolic AI and connectionism.
Okay, those are some big words. Break it down for me.
Sure. Symbolic AI, sometimes called good old-fashioned AI, is all about rules and logic.
Oh, so it's like pre-programmed responses to specific situations.
Exactly. You can think of it like an expert system.
Give me an example.
Sure. So in architecture, symbolic AI could be used to optimize a building's energy use based on sensor data. Like if a sensor detects that a room is empty, the lights could automatically turn off.
Okay, that makes sense. So what about connectionism? What's that all about?
Connectionism is inspired by neural networks, so it's more about learning and adaptation over time.
So that's where the learning aspect comes in.
Exactly. Think of a building facade that adjusts itself based on the weather or how people are using the space.
Wow, that's pretty wild.
Right. It's like the building is constantly learning and getting better at responding to its environment.
So it sounds like both of these AI approaches are about creating systems that are useful to us.
Right. Helpful.
Like making our lives more comfortable or efficient.
Exactly.
But not necessarily replicating human thought exactly.
Exactly. It's more about creating systems that can act rationally to achieve specific goals.
Okay, that makes sense. So we're not talking about buildings that will start composing symphonies anytime soon.
Probably not. Haha.
But there's another interesting concept that the book talks about. Embodied cognition.
I'm
not really familiar with that.
It's the idea that intelligence isn't just this abstract thing happening in our brains.
So it's not just thinking.
Right. It's shaped by our physical bodies and how we interact with the world. Like, a baby learns about gravity by dropping things, not by reading a textbook.
I see. So intelligence is about doing and experiencing, not just thinking.
Exactly. And this idea has actually influenced the way we design robots. Early robots were very rigid and pre-programmed.
Like those you see on factory assembly lines.
Exactly. But now we're seeing robots that can learn by interacting with their surroundings, just like that baby learning about gravity.
So the robot learns by trial and error, basically.
Kind of, yeah. It's a more flexible and adaptive approach to intelligence called subsumption architecture.
Okay, that makes sense for robots, but how does that apply to buildings?
Well, imagine a building that responds to changes in its environment with simple, prioritized actions, kind of like a reflex. For example, picture a building that adjusts its shape for structural balance or to optimize energy use.
So it's like the building can adapt and adjust, but within certain limits?
Exactly. It's not going to completely transform itself, but it can make subtle adjustments to optimize its performance.
That's super cool. Are there any real-world examples of buildings doing this?
Yes, there are. An architect named Konstantinos Grinis has done some really interesting research on this type of kinetic architecture. The book compares as to how our internal organs have a certain flexibility within our bodies.
That's a great analogy.
So the building can change and adapt, but within the boundaries of its overall design.
Okay, that's really fascinating. What else is out there in this world of intelligent architecture?
Well, let's talk about something even more mind-bending. Swarm intelligence.
Swarms, like bees or a flock of birds.
Exactly.
How does that relate to buildings?
It's the idea that complex, intelligent behavior can emerge from lots of simple agents following basic rules.
I'm not sure I follow.
Think about how a flock of birds can move in such beautiful and complex patterns, even though each individual bird is just following simple rules about staying close to its neighbors and avoiding obstacles.
So you're saying that if you have enough simple parts working together, you can get some pretty complex results.
Exactly. And some architects have actually tried to apply this principle to buildings.
Really?
Yeah. An architect named Oosterhuis envisioned these hyperbody buildings, which he imagined as interconnected swarms of actuators, users, and even information flows.
Hold on. Actuators, those are like tiny motors, right? The things that make things move.
Exactly.
Okay, so how did he use these swarms of actuators in his buildings?
He built this prototype called Muscle NSA, which was this soft, shape-shifting structure. It would actually change shape in response to people moving around inside it and sensor data.
Wow, so it was like a building that could actually move and breathe.
Yeah, kind of. It was a really interesting exploration of how we could create dynamic, responsive structures that go beyond traditional architecture.
Was this truly swarm intelligence, though, or more of a conceptual idea?
There's actually some debate about that. Some argue that it was more of a metaphor for swarm intelligence than a true example of it.
Okay, I see. But even as a metaphor, it's pretty inspiring, right?
Absolutely. It shows how we can think differently about the way we design and build spaces.
So it's not just about making buildings look cool. It's about making them actually interact with the people inside them.
Exactly.
It's blowing my mind. What else have they done with this swarm idea?
Well, they've actually taken it a step further with swarm robotics.
So we're talking actual robots working together to build things.
Yes. And it's not just a futuristic concept. It's actually happening right now.
Really? Like, what kinds of things are they building with swarm robots?
Well, the book mentions this design for a swarm roof. It's a roof made up of these little robotic discs that can move around to provide dynamic shading.
So it's like a roof that can adjust itself to let in more or less sunlight, depending on the time of day or the weather.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What else have they done?
Okay, picture this. 4 flying robots building a 6-meter-high tower out of foam bricks.
Wait, what? That actually happened.
It did. It was an installation called Flight Assembled Architecture. And here's the mind-blowing part. The robots weren't just pre-programmed to build the tower. They were actually coordinating with each other in real time, adjusting for tolerances and avoiding collisions.
That's insane. I have to see a video of that.
I know, right?
It's amazing to see how far this technology has come.
It really is.
We've talked about how AI can inspire the way we design buildings, but what about the spaces we live in every day?
Yeah.
How is AI changing those?
That's where we move from AI to something called ambient intelligence.
Ambient intelligence. Okay, now you're just making up words.
No, it's a real thing.
Okay, I'll trust you. What is it?
It's often shortened to AMA, and it's all about creating spaces that are designed to respond to our needs in a subtle and intuitive way.
So it's like the space can anticipate what we want.
Exactly. These spaces are often called intelligent environments, or IEs.
So are these intelligent environments just about automation? Like my coffee maker turning on automatically when my alarm goes off?
It's definitely more than just simple automation. Intelligent environments go beyond that. They actually use technology to learn and become more effective over time.
So it's like my house could learn my preferences and adjust the lighting, temperature, and other things accordingly.
Exactly. And there are some really cool projects out there that explore this idea.
Like what?
One example is the iDorm, an experimental student apartment that was developed at Essex University.
Okay, what was so special about it?
It was designed to adapt to its occupants' preferences using sensors and something called fuzzy logic.
Fuzzy logic. Okay, you're going to have to explain that one.
Sure. Fuzzy logic is a way for computers to deal with uncertainty and make decisions based on degrees of truth, rather than just yes or no answers.
Okay.
So even if your preferences change over time, the iDorm could learn and adapt to those changes.
That's pretty cool. So it's not just reacting to the environment, it's actually learning and evolving.
Exactly.
What other intelligent environments are out there?
Well, there was this really interesting project at MIT called the Hausen.
The Hausen, okay. What was that all about?
It was basically a real apartment that was outfitted with over 900 sensors to study activity recognition.
900 users. Wow. What were they trying to figure out with all those sensors?
They wanted to see if they could use sensors to understand how people move through a space and interact with objects. Like, could the house actually tell what you were doing?
That sounds pretty ambitious. Did it work? Could they actually tell what people were doing based on the sensor data?
It's actually more complicated than you might think. Even with all those sensors, the system still had trouble recognizing complex activities, especially if someone was doing two things at once.
So even with all that technology, there were still limitations.
Absolutely. It highlights just how complex human behavior is.
So even with all this amazing technology, we're still a long way from having homes that can perfectly anticipate our every need.
It seems so, yes.
Okay, so we've got the iDorm and the Hausen. Any other examples?
Yes. Have you heard of the PEI's Ecology project?
No. What is that?
It involved using a network of sensors and robots to assist people in their daily lives.
Robots, now you're talking. What did the robots do?
Each robot had a specific job, and they all worked together to make life easier for the people living in the space. Think of it like a community of helpful robots.
So it wasn't just one super smart robot trying to do everything, but a bunch of specialized robots working together like a team.
Exactly. And that's where the ecology concept comes in. The intelligence emerges from the interaction of multiple agents, not just one individual.
That's a really interesting idea.
Right. It's less about replacing humans with robots and more about creating a symbiotic relationship between humans and technology.
Okay, so we've seen some pretty amazing things so far. But I have to ask, are there any downsides to all of this? What are some of the potential problems with intelligent architecture?
That is a great question and something we need to consider carefully. We'll get into that next.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in all the cool technology.
Right, like, wow, my house can talk to me. But
we also need to think about the potential downsides.
What are some of the things we should be worried about?
One of the biggest concerns is loss of control.
Like, what do you mean by that?
Well, these intelligent environments are designed to make our lives easier.
Right, that's the whole point.
But what happens if they malfunction or make mistakes? Imagine your heating system going haywire in the middle of winter.
Oh, because it misinterpreted my preferences or something.
Exactly. Or what if the data that these systems are collecting about our habits and preferences gets into the wrong hands? That's a scary thought. Like, could our homes be spying on us?
That's a valid concern and something we need to be very careful about as this technology becomes more widespread.
It's a tough balance, right? We want all the convenience and personalization, but we also don't want to sacrifice our privacy.
Exactly. It's a trade-off. And it raises some really important questions about how much control we're willing to give up in exchange for convenience.
So is it possible to design these systems in a way that puts the user in control?
That's what a lot of researchers are working on.
I hope so, because I don't want to feel like my house is making decisions for me.
Right. No one wants to be a prisoner in their own home.
Exactly.
The book actually talks about the difference between autonomous systems and end-user-driven systems.
Okay, what's the difference?
Autonomous systems are basically in control. They learn and adapt, but you don't have much say in how they operate.
So it's like being on autopilot all the time.
Yeah, kind of. Which can be great sometimes, but other times you want to be able to take the wheel.
Right, like with self-driving cars. Sometimes you want the car to do the driving, but other times you want to be in control.
Exactly. And that's where end-user-driven systems come in.
So they give you more control.
Exactly. They're all about giving you the power to customize and control your environment. You get to set the parameters and decide how the system responds to you.
So it's like being able to program your house to do what you want.
In a way, yes.
That sounds a lot better than feeling like my house is bossing me around.
Right. It's less about the system making decisions for you and more about the system empowering you to make those decisions yourself.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Are there any examples of these end-user-driven systems? I'd love to hear about some real-world applications.
There are some really cool ones out there. One that I find particularly interesting is called PyP, which stands for Pervasive Interactive Programming.
Pervasive Interactive Programming. Okay, that's a mouthful. What is that?
Think of it like building with digital Lego blocks, where you can create your own virtual appliances by combining functions of existing devices.
So I could essentially create a custom device that does exactly what I want.
Exactly. You could have a motion sensor that triggers a specific light sequence when you enter a room, or a button that sends a notification to your phone when the laundry is done. The possibilities are endless.
That sounds really fun. Like a game, almost.
It is kind of like a game. It's all about giving people the tools to personalize their spaces and make technology work for them.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
It's making this technology accessible to everyone, not just tech experts.
That's the goal, to democratize access to intelligent environments and empower people to shape their own spaces.
Okay, we've talked about the potential downsides of intelligent architecture, and now we've seen some examples of how it can be used in a way that's more user-friendly and empowering.
Right.
So, what are some key takeaways for our listeners? What are the main things they should be thinking about when it comes to the ethics of intelligent architecture?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that we need to be very careful about how much control we're willing to give up.
Yeah, autonomy and privacy are really important.
Absolutely. We need to be mindful of the potential for these systems to be used in ways that could infringe on our privacy or limit our choices.
It's a little creepy to think that our homes could be collecting data on our every move.
It is. And that data could be used in ways that we never intended or consented to.
So we need to be aware of the risks.
Definitely. But we also need to be realistic about the potential benefits of this technology.
Right. I mean, there are a lot of ways that intelligent architecture could make our lives better if it's done right.
Exactly. It's about finding the right balance. And that balance is going to look different for everyone.
So it's not just about the cool factor of having a responsive house.
Right.
It's about thinking critically about how these technologies might impact our lives and making informed decisions about how we want to use them.
Absolutely. It's about being active participants in shaping the future of our built environment, not just passive consumers of technology.
Okay, I like that. So what else is out there in terms of these end-user-driven systems? We talked about PyP. What else is happening in this space?
Oh, there's so much happening. Have you heard of e-gadgets?
E-gadgets, no. Tell me about those.
They're kind of like PyP, but maybe even more hands-on.
Okay, how so?
Imagine these little modules that you can connect together to create custom devices and interactions, almost like building with digital building blocks.
Interesting. So you can create all sorts of different things with these e-gadgets.
Yeah, a motion sensor that triggers a specific light sequence, or a button that sends a notification to your phone when your plants need watering, that sort of thing.
So it's like a more tangible, modular approach
Yeah,
to designing your own intelligent environment.
exactly.
That sounds really cool. And could someone with limited tech skills use it?
That's the idea. It's
Wow.
all about making this technology accessible and user-friendly, no matter your level of technical expertise.
I love that. It's empowering people to take control of their own technology.
Exactly. And as new e-gadgets are developed, you can just add them to your existing setup.
So it's like future-proofing your home. Okay, so we've seen a lot of different approaches to designing intelligent environments, each with its own set of benefits and challenges.
It's a diverse field for sure.
But one thing that seems to be a common thread is the importance of putting the user in control.
Absolutely. Ultimately, the success of intelligent architecture depends on finding that balance between technological innovation and human-centered design.
We need to make sure that these technologies are enhancing our lives, not controlling them.
I think that's a great way to put it.
So where do you think all of this is headed? What's the future of intelligent architecture?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Yeah, it is a big question. But I think it's safe to say that intelligent architecture is going to keep blurring the lines between the physical and digital worlds.
I mean, that's already happening, right?
Yeah.
Our homes are getting smarter all the time.
Right. But the key is to make sure that integration of technology feels seamless and intuitive.
So it doesn't feel like we're living in some sci-fi movie.
Exactly. It shouldn't feel intrusive or overwhelming. It should feel natural.
So it's not just about adding more gadgets and sensors. It's about designing spaces that are truly responsive to our needs.
Exactly. I think we're going to see more personalized and adaptable spaces in the future.
Like, what do you mean by that?
Imagine a home that can adjust to your energy levels throughout the day.
So if I'm tired, the house could create a calming atmosphere.
Exactly. And if you need a boost, it could create a more invigorating environment.
That would be amazing. But, we can't forget about those ethical considerations we talked about.
Oh, absolutely not. Those are more important than ever.
Do you think we'll see more focus on user control and privacy as this
Yeah.
technology keeps developing?
I think we have to. Those things are crucial if we want people to feel comfortable embracing intelligent architecture.
It's not about giving up control over our lives.
No, not at all.
It's about using technology to empower us to create spaces that support our well-being.
Exactly. It's about making our lives better, not more complicated.
This has been a really fascinating deep dive.
It has been.
I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of this topic.
There's so much more to explore, definitely.
It's not just about the buildings themselves.
It's about how this technology will change the way we live.
Yeah, the way we work, the way we interact with each other. It's a big deal.
It really is. What stood out to you the most from this conversation?
For me, the most interesting part was seeing how all these different approaches to AI are being applied to architecture, from those early concepts like the generator to the more recent stuff with swarm robotics.
And there's intelligent environments, yeah. There's so much happening in this field, it's hard to keep up.
I know. But it's so exciting to see how these ideas are being translated into real-world projects. Like, it's not just science fiction anymore.
It really is incredible what architects and designers are doing with this technology.
They're not just designing buildings, they're designing experiences.
That's a great way to put it. So, to wrap up, I want to leave you with this thought.
Okay, I'm listening.
Imagine you could design your own intelligent environment. What would it be like?
Ooh, that's a good one.
What capabilities would it have? What problems would you want it to solve? What kind of experience would you create?
That's something for all of our listeners to think about. As we move into this future of intelligent architecture, it's important to remember that we have a say in how it unfolds.
We do. It's not predetermined.
It's something we're creating together through the choices we make.
It's an exciting time to be alive, that's for sure.
Well, thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the world of intelligent architecture.
It was my pleasure. Always happy to talk about this stuff.
To all our listeners out there, thanks for tuning in. Keep those brains buzzing, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.
Thanks for listening. See you on the next episode of Daedalus Debugger, the architect in the digital maze. Bye!